One of the questions that I got on social media recently was my memory is not exactly what it used to be. What might I do to assist me in not losing my memory capacities? The first thing I want to say about that is a hierarchy of values dictates our destiny and dictates how we perceive, decide, and act, and what we attend to, what we retain in our information and memory, and what we apply. And so we'll find out that anything that's high in our values, whenever we're doing something that's either linked to it or is associated with it, we tend to retain it. But anything that's not, we tend to not let it in. Let's say you walk down the street, you meet somebody, and they say their name, and then somebody comes up right afterwards and said, "Who is that?" And you didn't get it, didn't even register. That's because you didn't see that individual high on your values and important to you, and so you didn't even let it go in. And so if it does go in, it goes to short-term memory and it fades. But if all of a sudden you meet somebody that's extremely valuable and you think, oh, this could be business opportunity, relationship opportunity, or something, and they're really valuable and they're aligned with your highest values, you'll tend to write their name down, receive it, type it in. You'll make sure you retain it. So if you think that your memory is fading, it could be that your values have changed and things that were important 6 months ago are now not. And now, because your values are changed, the things you're expecting to remember are no longer as important as new things that you're remembering. So the first thing you want to do is ask this: where is your memory heightened, and where is it? Where are you retaining information uh, really greatly at this moment? I had a TV show, a reality TV show at Universal Studios a number of years back, and there was a gentleman there who said and claimed that he couldn't retain things. And he was working a menial job because he didn't believe he could remember things he didn't think he could learn. And I asked him a really trick question. I said, "How long do you remember having a memory problem?" He said, "As long as I can remember." I said, "Well, it's interesting you remember this." So I asked him a really question that was off the wall. I said, "Where do you have incredible memory?" He says, "I don't." And I said, "Yeah, I'm asking a very pertinent question. Where do you have incredible memory?" He says, "I don't." And I said, "Where do you have incredible memory? Look." You're not looking. You're giving me an answer within 2 seconds instead of looking. I can see when their eyes are looking for an answer, when they're just defiant and saying, "I don't have any," because that was their belief. And I found out when I asked him and kept asking him, he said, "I remember all the birthdays of people in my life that are important." I said, "Okay, great. What else?" He said, "Yeah, I remember pretty well anybody in my family. My family is important to me." Okay, so you have great memory on the birthdays and what's happening and anything that's going on, and you're communicating with them? Yep. Would you say that what's highest on your value, what your life is demonstrating, is your family? That's pretty high on your value. He goes, "Yep, definitely." I said, "You have a high value on that. You're retaining information on that. You know all their birthdays. You know what's going on. You keep information, whatever they say to you, retain it." "I guess I do." I said, "But the area you think you have a poor memory is where?" "Well, yeah, things at work and things in the news or whatever." I said, "Do you really value those things?" He goes, "I guess I don't." I said, "Your hierarchy of values is going to dictate where your memory's strongest and weakness. Whatever is high in your value, you'll tend to retain. Whatever is low in your value, you'll tend not to retain unless it's an emergency, a survival mechanism, as something extremely pleasurable, extremely painful, and it'll be stored in your hippocampus. And that'll then be short-term memory and for emergencies, but things that are long-term have to be somehow associated with what's valuable to you." So we found out that he had an incredible memory. And when he actually got that, he started to cry. And he goes, "So I don't have a problem with my memory." I said, "No, you have a concentrated memory system in the area that's highest on your value. And you've not linked a lot of things to that. So therefore, your memory is really focused, really hyper-focused in the area of family." And he goes, "So I don't have a problem with memory." I said, "Well, you tell me. You remember everything about their birthdays? You remember this? You remember that?" He goes, "I do, don't I?" I said, "But you've been told that because people are asking you questions and you can't seem to retain things that over here and then what's important to them but not important to you." He said, "That's really eye-opening." I also seen this people here. I've met people in their 70s and 80s, and they start to think they're missing cylinders on their memory, and they think, "Oh, maybe I'm getting Alzheimer's or senile dementia or something like that." And then we find out the same thing. They were working, and while they were working, they had a credible memory about what's going on at work, and then they stopped and retired And now the area of their focus may be photography or family or something else, but they're expecting to still be having a quick alert memory in the area that they used to. And because they can't retain that, they think they're losing their memory. But if I go and find out what's most important to them now, family and photography, they can tell me everything about the pictures they've taken. So beware before you label yourself having weak memory. You may simply have a change in values, and things that were once important are maybe less important. And so your brain fades on that. It doesn't need that as much as the new things. Find out where you have a sharp memory and keep records of that. And obviously, if you're eating very quality food and you're keeping your blood sugar stable and you're making sure that you're getting adequate rest and you're making sure that you are getting a little exercise, you'll keep your brain functioning and have probably an increased memory. Whatever you link to your highest values tends to be restored. So ask yourself, whatever you want to remember, how is it helping you fulfill what's most important in your life? In the Breakthrough Experience program that I teach, I show people how to make links, take whatever there's happening in their life and show it how it helps you fulfill what's most important to you and value. And then all of a sudden your retention of information goes up. I learned that when in my 20s. I could take almost any topic that I wanted to study, and I've studied a lot of different topics. Any topic, as long as I linked it to the evolution of human consciousness, how to maximize human awareness potential, how to empower, an individual's life, I retain the information and can have a great recall. So as long as we link it to what we value most, we tend to maximize our retention of information. So that can be it. Make sure you're eating wisely, make sure you're sleeping, make sure you're getting some exercise, and make sure you're linking whatever you want to learn to what's important to you. And before you judge yourself and label yourself as having a problem with your memory, make sure it's not something that's fading for a reason because it's no longer as important to you. Your brain doesn't want to waste glucose and oxygen on things that aren't really important, and it fades things just like your muscles. If you don't use your muscles, you lose them. You don't use your brain, you lose it. Find something that's meaningful, associate things to that, and you'll retain the information. And you'll find out maybe you've got a greater memory than you first thought.